Welcome to the Undiscovered Gems podcast, hosted by NBA legend and business powerhouse Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds.
Hello, and welcome to another show of Undiscovered Gems. I'm your host, Charles D. Smith, and we have Professional of the Year, Sara Regester. Sara has written a book, Courage to Shine. She's also has the understanding and the knowledge of how to feel confident outside your comfort zone. We all need to know a little bit about that. And last but not least, she is a stress mastery expert. She's going to teach us how to meet our stress where it is and how to take charge of it. Sara, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm happy to have you back. Sara, we're going to dig right into it. I mean, we want a little snippet about how you got into your career, but we want to get right into the guts of this content. But first, tell us, how did you get into your career?
Well, I was a busy registered nurse working in a hospital setting for many years. And as a healthcare professional, I really wanted to be, top of my career and really valued who I was professionally. And as a consequence of that, the way I was working is I really opened the door to a lot of stress for myself, how I was taking care of my patients, how I was dealing with my, colleagues. And I kept pushing and striving. I never said no. I took on extra work, that worker overachiever, because that's how kind of person I am is, to go for it and really value what I can offer. And as a consequence, I wiped out my health, not once, but multiple times from the stress I was working in. And what was interesting is I learned a lot from that. And each time I got sick, I kind of backed off, took care of myself, got well, and then I'd get back into the pattern and do it again. And I saw a similar theme in my patients, caring for people at the edge of that deeply confronting in the hospital. I was a cardiac nurse dealing with heart surgery. And I had this epiphany moment that I asked myself, I thought, wow, how can I be a successful professional, successful in my career without wiping myself out? And isn't it interesting that I've been able to heal myself from all these health problems? And I wonder how I could help other people heal themselves. And that was like the light bulb moment when I recognized that I understood from my own journey, kind of the mind, body, spirit of how we really heal and how we make change in our life. And if we don't make change, we're going to recreate the same problem over and over again. And I would say that's probably at the heart of the work I do is in stress mastery coaching. I help people kind of rewire their patterns to find a more productive way to do their life in a way that is sustainable without taking yourself out in the process of creating success.
Well, it's been stated, and it's a proven fact, that the best leaders in this world are those that know how to serve. And by the way you talk about how you've worked with your clients, being a nurse and learned from their experiences and their trauma, their stress, and you being able to see how they heal, you've become an expert in your own right from that. So let's get into it and talk a little bit about this stress mastery. Stress is probably one of the number one factors, along with anxiety, that we have in this world today. And people suffer from stress in many different ways, and it comes up physically, emotionally, in so many different forms. Let's talk about how you meet people, or you meet their stress where it is for people.
Yeah, well, if you look at the new science of stress, it really, in the research, they found it's really how you think about stress and probably the hardwired habits you have around stress that creates the harm. And so in the studies, if you took two really busy people that have stressful lives, and person A has this mindset that this stress is bad, it's going to kill me, I've got to find a way to stop the stress, reduce my stress, manage my stress. And person B, who's just as busy, has an attitude of, wow, I'm really busy, how am I going to get through this? What do I need to do to find a solution? And they don't have a belief that stress is harmful. And that's kind of the core that set up how I designed my stress mastery programs, whether I'm working with individuals, speaking to a group, or working with small groups, like in a lunch and learn leadership format.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is about how there's different types of stress responses. And most of us have the habit of fight or flight, where we go into the fight, flight, or freeze mode with overreacting to situations in our everyday life, where really in our physiology, that stress response is meant to keep us safe and help us take action or react or freeze where we are, whatever we're going to do to actually survive. So if you're going to go, after this podcast and you're going to avoid a car accident, you definitely want that fight or flight, like to be able to swerve your car, slam on the brakes, avoid an accident. But when you have that kind of response in your day-to-day at work or at home with your family, it's like always keeping the faucet on, running full bore. And of course, it's hard on the cells, it's hard on the organs, it's really hard on our system if we always respond to stress with that fight or flight or freeze response. And so learning how to master stress isn't really about managing it. It's not about reducing it, because the bottom line that I recognize in my clients is we stress about those things we care about. And yes, you could mitigate, by ending something that's stressful, that's, an option. But sometimes the things that we stress about, we don't want to get rid of them.
Right.
Like your children, your partner, the projects you're sharing that you're working on, Charles. It's like getting rid of it to manage your stress is really not an option. We really sometimes need a more productive way to address when we're feeling triggered, when we're feeling confronted by a stressful situation, or we're having competing priorities. It really is about having better tools and strategies to meet stress so you can get through it without wiping yourself out from the overreacting super duper stress response.
So you mentioned the word triggered, and a lot of people do have these triggers that push them into stress. How do you manage it before? How does one get to learn and understand their triggers? And what do you do when it starts to surface or you start to feel it? What are some of the tools that you have to help people?
I think the first step is to have a tool or practice where you can respond and not go into reaction. And so at the heart of stress mastery truly is mindful awareness. It starts often with just taking that pause, taking a breath. And so I have a practice that's one of the foundational practices, and I wrote about it in my book as well, because it's so simple. I call it pause, notice, choose. That in that moment when you feel the trigger, or you're overwhelmed in your day, or someone said something or did something, if we can have enough self-awareness to actually just take a step where we can just pause, take a breath, and drop down to our center. So as an athlete, you would know your center of gravity is actually 2 to 3 finger breaths below your navel. That's where your center is. And actually, when we can drop out of our internal dialogue and the reaction mode where we're losing energy, but we can take a breath and drop in, then it's much easier to actually find a solution and say, wow, I'm really triggered, or wow, I'm really overwhelmed, or how am I going to get through this today? And it gives you some bandwidth internally to be able to respond differently externally. And so the pause is taking a breath and dropping into your center. Noticing is naming for yourself what's really up for me right now. Why am I going through this? And then choose. Okay, what do I need to do for myself? Do I need to have a conversation with that person? Do I need to go make a cup of tea? Do I need to take 10 deep breaths? It's like that giving that space of awareness is so crucial to turning around any pattern, particularly stress patterns, so you can rewire a new way. And that takes practice, takes some steps and strategies. And from that perspective, if we don't take that pause and drop in and say, what can I do about this for myself to choose, we will go to our reacting habits like phone scrolling and emotional eating and, mindlessly watching movies to distract ourselves. We'll distract to try and escape it, rather
Right.
than leaning in and finding a solution, getting through it. And
Right.
the nugget is that we grow from our stress. The stress is often life's challenges and adversity are often the greatest opportunity for our character refinement, for our personal development and healing. But it takes an important decision to pay attention, to notice, and giving yourself that space to just take a breath is where it starts.
Can you give some definable examples of how people can grow leaning into their stress?
Yes, I can tell you. Just to use an example, how I witnessed this in my patients, for example, if you came to the hospital with a heart condition and had a wake up call, whether you have open heart surgery or a stent or just the angioplasty and the testing, that kind of health condition, any physical confrontation of an ailment,
Hmm.
when you actually take responsibility and say, wow, how am I going to change my life? This is the wake up call. I need to stop smoking. I need to eat better. I need to, start exercising. That sometimes the impetus is an event, an adverse event, where inside yourself, the internal motivation of why it's important to you is where the motivation comes to actually make change. And so that's that. So the example is, if I have someone with a heart condition, they come into the hospital and they're getting all the testing and diagnosis, that diagnosis is important information to have to know how to take care of yourself. But it's the individual who meets that diagnosis to say, how can I take responsibility to change my life so I don't die and I can live? And so it's the same thing. Other challenges and adverse events in our lives, many times when we get to the other side of it, we're changed.
Hmm.
We're actually increased our measure of self-worth, and we're able to kind of take that in as something we grow from in terms of how we're stronger now, how we recognize we're more capable. And most importantly, we don't have to go back and kind of make our same mistakes or have that same lesson again. If we get the lesson and we grow, we can kind of move on and, and engage with new opportunities to grow. And even like a job, like if you got fired from a job or laid off, like there's a part of us that will go into grief. Sometimes we will go into pity. Self-pity is
Hmm.
very destructive.
Right. Right.
There's something about, if you can just take that breath, stay mindful, be aware, and think of that philosophy of, well, okay, that chapter's closed, what's next for me? So it gets you looking forward and moving forward rather than being stuck in the I lost my job, I never la, 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 where you're caught in the downward spiral.
Right.
So that it's important to recognize that the turning point is when you recognize, hey, maybe there's even a better job I'm going to get, or maybe there's like some new thing I'm going to do. That often the things that I would say die in your life open the door to something new that you would have never thought of if that change hadn't happened. But as
Right.
human beings, we hate change.
Yeah,
We
I
like,
guess there's billions of dollars spent sitting in that chair talking about change or coping with it. So you're absolutely right.
yeah,
Um, you also are quoted in talking about how to feel confident outside your comfort zone. Um, how do you approach that? Because if everybody was able to do that, we wouldn't have a lot of problems. But it's easier said than done. How do you shepherd people along to get comfortable outside their comfort zones?
this is kind of tied to the stress mastery piece.
Hmm.
Because if you think about individuals that you offer them something new or a change of some sort or an opportunity to try something, that they'll often say, oh, I would never do that. That would stress me out. And so when someone like declines an opportunity to go outside their comfort zone, they're kind of saying like, no, I don't want to grow. I'm good how I am. I'm fine. And so there's a complacency of staying where we're comfortable, even if it's the devil we know, where people typically will settle or they'll put up with things that they're not really happy about. And so for us to really gain new arenas to grow or new things to learn from, we are going to have to leave our comfort zone. We are going to have to say yes to, there's going to be a learning curve to the new job or exploring a new relationship. And there's also something really important about learning from our mistakes, that we can swirl around in the emotional soup of a mistake, but really our mistakes sometimes are part of our greatest growth opportunities. If we wouldn't have made the mistake, we wouldn't have gotten the lesson. And so part of that, the comfort zone, why I mention mistakes is so often people don't say yes. They don't put their hand up because they're afraid they're not good enough. They're not going to get it right. They'll make a mistake. And it's literally like driving your car with the handbrake on. It's going to hold you back. And so there's something about allowing the benevolence of allowing myself to make mistakes so that I can have that opportunity to stretch beyond my comfort zone and grow. And personally, why I wrote about that was because I was the kind of person that looked really great and very capable on the outside and had a can-do attitude. But really internally, I was very insecure, very anxious, and it was almost debilitating. And so I had to learn for myself the tools and strategies that when I am leaving my comfort zone and I am feeling anxiety or insecurity, even though I'm trying to mask it from everyone else, how am I going to support myself internally to still keep engaging and growing, even if it's uncomfortable because I'm feeling insecure, unsure of myself, or anxious?
Right. Well, you have a situation where, it seems like there's growth, maturity, and development in the area where you're uncomfortable. And that's why you're saying when somebody pushes back, you say, well, I don't want to grow. It's almost like, I don't want to grow. I don't want to develop. You have to get in it in order to grow and develop. And that's what the clear fact is. And people do fight that. It is very uncomfortable. Let's move toward your book, Courage to Shine. What is that book about? There it is. You might as well tell them you can be contacted at directionsforwellness.com.
On Amazon, on Audible. plug. This book took me 6 years to write.
Wow.
It was not fast. And the first pass, I wrote this book because I'd already been working with stress mastery, helping my clients, be more stress resilient, more confident, having skills, tools, strategies to support themselves, to have those conversations or take those actions and make change, have the transformation. And so when I wrote a book about it, it was really, really boring. I was like disillusioned. I'm like, oh my gosh, I finally wrote this book and it's boring. And so in the next years that I rewrote it, I put my own story into this book. And so if you want to learn anything about Sara Regester, it's right here. But in a way of, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what I learned. Here's what you can do. So it's very transparent and very, I would say, pragmatic approach to stress that you might experience in the workplace, in your family, how to navigate change. And there's even a spiritual component that really is what I saw. Because, I teach internationally personal growth and development from a shamanic lineage to bring personal growth and healing. And I really did recognize what I saw in the hospital, what I saw in myself. It's the mind, body, spirit wholeness of how we heal, how we grow, and how we evolve. And we each do it at our own pace. And it's much easier to have the support of a coach or someone with you to help guide you than trying to just do it on your own sometimes. Right. I mean, you could read a book and you can get some nuggets, and it is all those things that you do, workshops, et cetera. They're all important. But there's something about when we make changes in our life, our health gets better. When we are able to find our way through making change to things that are not serving us anymore, they might have been habits or strategies we took on to survive and cope when we were young now as an adult. We don't need that. And so there's something about recognizing that there's a part of us that has a natural desire to grow, to refine, to be our best self. But we each do it in our own way at our own pace. And so that's my job, is to meet people where they are, to give them the tools and the teachings to help them navigate life in a way that brings more happiness and harmony, better health. It's quite transformative when you have a coach or a guide to work with. So I tried to put that in my book, as a way for people to actually have some practices and some simple little rituals to do.
Right.
And the things that helped me, I put in this book.
So your book is a self-help book. Is it at just the overarching keys that people can get from your book? Is it when they finish reading the book, how will they move forward with information that they can use in their life? Is it, for example, is it now they can master their stress? I mean, you have a lot of components in there. Just give us some keys that they can look forward to in reading your book.
Yeah, well, the first thing that really surprised me when I spoke to people, they shared, after they read the book or listened to it, it's Audible also. I know the busy bees like me out there do more Audible than reading, but people were like, oh my gosh, I was like turning down the pages, got my highlighter, I'm making notes in the margin. Like it wasn't the kind of book that people just sit and read. They were actually digging into it and pulling out, the nuggets that they could use for themselves. And, as far as a spiritual kind of message in there, it really is to honor who we are as really humans that are here in this lifetime, to explore life, to have experiences, and to evolve and grow through our work, through our families, our relationships, and our community. We're all doing that. And so this is really, like I would say, a toolbox that has some specific teachings that come from my shamanic lineage that support transformation and change. And then it has the science, the new science of stress, to have some actual tools and a pragmatic approach, to have some practices to create more stress resilience. A better way to drop in and say, how am I going to deal with this, versus the hardwired, energy flies out of our body, we're reactive. It's like, that's not a productive way to really resolve when you're in a tight spot or you're having competing priorities of family, work, me time. It's important to know that when we have so much distraction in our lives and so much commitment and so many things that we have, so many irons in the fire, this book actually helps people find a way to discern and prioritize that, to just stop and, think, okay, well, here's my approach to deal with these competing things that are important to me. Because so often our stress is competing values, competing priorities of how we're trying to do it all right now. And that's not going to work. It's going to be stressful.
You've mentioned a couple times your shamanic work. Can you explain that to our audience?
I can, because, it's often, I think, misunderstood that a lot of people today think shamanism is going out into the desert with some Peruvian medicine man and having a cactus plant hallucinogenic experience. And that's not what I teach. What I teach in terms of shamanism is using nature to heal. And so we have the elements and the as above energies, the so below, the mineral world, animal world, plant world. It's really, how can we connect to creation? How can we lean into the natural world around us to be connected to life and the stream of livingness, not where with our free will, we often disconnect, distract, and then we go into that hopelessness. And so the shamanism that I teach is a combination of very ancient wisdom from an oral tradition, as well as combining with ceremonies, because alchemy is a ritual or ceremonial process that brings in the elements, brings in the worlds of Grandmother Earth to create transformation. And so when you get teachings and then you take it into a ritual or ceremony for yourself, it really increases the rate of personal growth and development and healing when you can do both the learning of it and the experiencing of it physically.
Mm-hmm. When you're teaching or training in shamanism, do you have to be, does your environment matter? Can you do it in an office? Do you have to be out in nature? Can you do it anywhere?
That's such a great question. You know, you can do it anywhere, any place, and anyone who works with me, even if you read my book, you're going to have a flavor of it.
Good.
Because that's who I am. You know, I'm the mind, body, spirit. Hey, everyone, let's evolve and grow together.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be so overt in how I'm speaking, but it's always there between us. How can I support you to grow? How can I support you to find your healing? How can I support you to take responsibility for your healing? Not me telling you this is what you need to do, or, you know, I'm not giving advice. It's like we're side by side. You're driving your own bus. I've got the GPS. Let's do this together about how you want to move forward.
Well, let's move forward very quickly on the fact that we want to work together as men and women. And
Yes.
men and women, everybody says we're equal in the workplace, but we operate differently. How is that? How do we operate differently?
Yeah, this is such an important piece of healing in our collective. And I really believe we're in the process of healing this. So it's understanding that, yes, men and women are equal in terms of we're human beings. And genetically, you know, we're wired differently, we're designed differently, and we operate differently. And to some extent, it's even how we've evolved. That when we can recognize and value men in general, in their masculine way, have a certain approach to how they work and how they show up in the workspace or at home or in the community. And the feminine, the women, have a different way. And what's actually interesting is when you bring the two together, you can actually create something bigger, more expansive when you have the balance of the male and the female coming together in a project. But if we have just women working together and just men working together, you won't get that beauty of the two kind of merging and creating something bigger. And so in simple terms, the masculine is wired, if you think back to cavemen, to really be focused on the direct action that's needed. You know, like shoot the deer, kind of. They've got their eye on the target and they want to go from A to B to get something done. And so that's why in our lives, men typically want to offer solution. They want to provide something for the people and the women in their lives. That, you know, they really have blessings that they can contribute. And the feminine is a receptive energy, receptive and creative. And so as women, if you think back to early days, that they were taking care of the family and looking for the herbs and the plants for the meals. And then they'd see, oh, there's flowers for the cave. There's some beauty. And so that home, heart, and hearth, it comes quite naturally to the feminine women in the workplace or at home. It's how we are designed in our creation. And so if we want to bring that to the workspace, you know, we want to bring it to the meetings, we want to bring it to the project. And so the masculine is more about providing, protecting, and, you know, really coming together. So I would say simply to summarize that when you're working on a team, the feminine nature is to look at the whole big picture, see the interconnection, how's everything related, explore all the options. And then the masculine wants to just find the solution. Let's just go from A to B. And so this is why the feminine in the workspace can create the ideas, see the bigger picture and the vision of options and what needs to be included. But actually the male contribution is to say, okay, then here's the way we're going to do it. And the execution is much more efficient when you have the mixture of the creative feminine and then the action of the masculine. That working together.
Well explained. I think we can understand that. That was
okay.
Very
Good.
well. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds based on our conversation, Sara. What do you want our audience to walk away with? Give them a couple nuggets.
Yeah, a couple nuggets. So I gave a practice today. I gave that pause, notice, choose. Anyone can do that anytime, any place. It's about taking that breath, dropping down with your breath and your focus in your lower belly. Notice, name what's there for you. Choose what action will you take that will empower you and not sabotage you. So that right there can help people meet stress in a more masterful way. And certainly I would love people to read my book, The Courage to Shine, How to Feel Confident Outside Your Comfort Zone, which is available on Amazon Book and Apple Books. And it's on Audible also. And then I love, speaking to groups, working with clients. So certainly if anyone wants to coach with me or have my stress mastery from feeling stuck to feeling free workshop, I'm happy to bring it to the workspace.
Awesome. Sara, thank you for dropping the gems on the Undiscovered Gem show today. Thank you for coming back. And once again, our audience is more informed than they were before they saw this show. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Gems with our host, Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds. Brought to you by Pods Entertainment Group.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.